Welcome everyone to another week of our joint study of the Haftara. This week we have the great zchus of reading a new sefer, reading Parshas Bamidbar, and the Haftara for Parshas Bamidbar is the second parak of Sefer Hoshea. Now, when you have a Haftara from Sefer Hoshea, I know for me, it kind of gives you an uneasy feeling because we don't know that much about Hoshea. More than that, it's hard to know how to characterize our Haftarah, right? Is it a nevuah of nechama, which generally we translate as prophecy of consolation, or maybe more specifically or more accurately, prophecy of restoration? Or is it a nevuah of puranut? Is it a prophecy of destruction? When you can't answer that basic question, it makes the Haftarah slightly more difficult to get through. Okay? So, on the one hand, Haftara describes the exile of the Jewish people from Eretz Yisrael to the Midbar, to the desert, where all kinds of bad things will happen to us. On the other hand, right, it doesn't get any better than Ve'irastich li le'olam, the end of our parsha, we're going to be betrothed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? That's a kind of nechama. So which is it? So before we answer that question, if we do answer that question, let's start with the basic question that we always ask every week, which is, what is the second parak of Sefer Hoshea doing as the Haftarah to Parshas Bamidbar? What's the connection? And here, on a basic level, it's really, really obvious, right? Parshas Bamidbar, certainly in English, is known as Bamidbar, is known as numbers, right? The theme, or one of the themes of the parsha, is the census and how exactly many people there were in Bnei Israel and how many in every shevet. Right? Similarly, Hoshea begins with, our Haftara begins with, Vayam mispar b'nei Yisrael kechol hayam asher lo yimad v'lo yisafer. Right? There'll be so many people in Ammi Yisrael, it'll be impossible to count them at all. Vayam b'mkom Hoshea omer lohem lo ami atem yomer lohem b'nei elchai. Okay, it sounds kind of nice, but we're not sure exactly what that means. We'll come back to it in a minute. Okay, but the basic connection is, Bamidbar, numbers, is counting Bnei Israel, and our Haftarah starts with the fact that we'll be so numerous at some point it'll be impossible to count us. Okay? Now, if you want another connection, it's not as obvious, but it could be a deeper idea and something we could follow along with, which is not the name of the parsha in English, but the name of the parsha in Hebrew, Bamidbar. Right? The Navi talks many times about sending us to the Midbar. Here's a good example. Lachein hini anochim befatah v'olachti hamidbar v'dibarti al liba. I'm going to send her to the Midbar, and I'm going to speak to her. V'natati la et kiramel misham bet emek achor lepetach tikva v'anta shama kimei neurea kiyom alotam eretz Yisrael. Right, I'll give her back the vineyards. It'll be like the valley of Achor, which is like a place of hope. Right, and Bnei Yisrael will respond as they did in the days of their youth, as when they came out of Mitzrayim, which again could be really, really good, could be a fresh start, or it could be negative. Maybe we didn't respond so well when we came out of Mitzrayim. But it's impossible to talk at all about Hoshea Perek Bet without looking at Hoshea Perek Aleph, or more precisely, looking at the general theme of the Sefer. And for this, there's a Gemara. The Gemara in Pesachim, Pei Zayin Amud Aleph, tells us the backstory of Sefer Hoshea. The Gemara explains that Hashem appeared to Hoshea and said to him, and complained to him, really, the Jewish people are not being faithful, right? This is a bad time in Jewish history. This is Avodah Zarah, they're worshiping the Baal. It's very, very bad. And shockingly, Hoshea responds to HaKadosh Baruch Hu by saying, well then, trade them in. Right? If the Jewish people are not being loyal to you and they're not keeping your Torah that you've given only to them, so trade them in for people who are going to be loyal and are going to keep your Torah. Right? That's the introduction to it. And then, bizarrely, because it's a bizarre story, the Gemara says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, well, it's in the Psukim, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Hoshea, as we find at the beginning of the book, go out and marry a prostitute. I mean, we know what a prostitute is, and we know what it means about her. It means she's not loyal, right? So Hoshea marries a prostitute, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands him, and they have 3 children. And the names of the 3 children are fascinating, and the Gemara tells us. The first child is a boy, and he's commanded to name him Yisrael, or really Yizrakel, right? God will replant, meaning God will replant us in Eretz Yisrael, and all will be good with us. Okay. Then they had a daughter, and God commands them to name the daughter Lo Ruchama, right? The object of no mercy. That's obviously a very negative thing. God won't have rachamim on us. He won't have mercy on us. That's bad. Okay. And finally, they have another son, and the name of the final son is Lo Ammi, right? You're not my people. Meaning we forfeited our claim to be God's chosen people. Now, you can't miss the point when we reread the beginning of the Haftara. You can't miss the point of the names. Well, it says the Navi, Parak Bet Halacha Pasuk Aleph, Vayam Mispar Bnei Yisrael Kechol Hayam Asher Lo Yimad V'Lo Yisafar. We talked about it already. Vayam Bimkom Asher Yomer Lohem Lo Ami Atem. Instead of being Lo Ami, as I told you to name your son, Yomer Lohem Bnei El Chai. No, you are my sons. Right? It's a very positive thing. Next. V'nikbitzu b'nei Yehuda u'b'nei Yisrael yachtav v'samu lahem rosh echad v'alu min haaretz ki gadol yom Yisrael. Right, that's the first son's name, Yizrakel. It'll be a great day when God will replant us in Eretz Yisrael. Imru la'achechem ami v'la'achotechem ruchama. Not lo ruchama, I won't have mercy on you, but ruchama, I will have mercy on you. So the first 3 psukim of the Haftara basically are plays on the names that Hoshea has given to his 3 children. And God tells him, apparently, there will be good times. It's a nevuah of Nechama, and everything will be fine. But later on, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Hoshea to give up his children, to give up his family, Hoshea says, I can't give up my children. And you understand that. It's very moving. He's the father. How could that be? So God tells him, first of all, your wife is a prostitute. So you don't even know that you're the father of these children, right? We don't really find out. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't tell us. In the Psukim, it sounds more like he gave birth to the first one, maybe not the last 2. Doesn't matter. So he says, but Am Yisrael, they are my children. They are my chosen. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, they are my children. So therefore, Hoshea realizes the tragic error of his advice to HaKadosh Baruch Hu when he told him, trade in Am Yisrael for another nation, when he doesn't want to trade in his own children, who may not even be his children, because God told him to. This is very, very reminiscent, at least to me, of one other place, at least in Tanakh, and that's Yonah. At the end of Yonah, right, God brings a kikayon, a kind of plant to give him shade, and Yonah loves the plant. And says the Psukim, Vayomer Elokim el Yonah ha'heitev chara l'cha. I'm sorry, then God destroys the kikayon. And Yonah is gutted, he's depressed. Vayomer Elokim el Yonah ha'heitev chara l'cha l'kikayon, Vayomar heitev chara li ad maves. Yes, until death, I'm crushed by the fact that you took away the plant. Vayomer Hashem ata chasta al kikayon. You care so much for this plant that you had nothing to do with its creation and nothing to do with sustaining it. That's the way of plants. They come, they go, it's no big deal. Says God, I shouldn't have mercy on Ninveh, right? Yonah, who got Ninveh to do tshuva, then regretted it. And God says to him, I shouldn't have mercy on Ninveh. Asher yesh ba harbe mishtem esrei bo adam, asher lo yada bein yimino lismono ubehema rabba. Right? I have to have mercy on Ninveh. Very similar to what God is saying to Hoshea. You don't want to give up your children. You're not really sure that they're your children. Am Yisrael is my child, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I shouldn't care about them? Of course I care about them. Okay, so that's one big theme in our Haftara. But if we want to go further in the Haftara, we have to ask ourselves, what's the historical background of Hoshea? When did he live? And what did he prophesy about? And this also, incredibly enough, is a Gemara. The Gemara in Baba Basra, Daf Yud Dalam and Beis says as follows. The Pasuk says, Tchilat Dvar Hashem b'Hoshea. Ask the Gemara, im Hoshea diber tchila, did God speak first to Hoshea? V'lo Moshe vad Hoshea, kama neviim hayu. God spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu and Yoshua and all the Nevi'im and Shoftim and Shmuel, right? Hoshea wasn't first. That's not what it means. Shayat tchila la'arba'a nevi'im shenit'abu b'oto ha'perek. No, Hoshea was first of 4 Nevi'im who prophesied at around the same historical time. Ve'elohein, Hoshea, Yeshayahu, Amos, and Micha. Okay, so it's easiest to identify Yeshayahu and when he lived, because he lived well before Yirmiyahu. He lived before Churban Bayis Rishon. That's the period of time in which Hoshea is speaking. And let's just be clear. Our purpose in quoting the Gemara isn't to say that Hoshea came a year before, 2 years before Yeshayahu. That doesn't matter to us. It's to give us a sense for who he was and to who he was prophesying, right? So if we understand who he's talking to, we understand something significant about what he's saying. And here Rav Moshe Lichzin has a really, really incredibly great idea, I think. He says, look at the difference between Nevi'im Rishonim, Yoshua, and people who came afterwards, and Nevi'im Achronim. It's a completely different type of Nevuah. Meaning, in Nevi'im Rishonim, yes, there are good things that happen and there are bad things that happen. But there's no Golos, right? There's nothing that compares to Bnei Yisrael being uprooted from their land. So the relatively limited Nevuos we have are within a certain range. The range is pretty small. People don't have to fear of getting kicked out of Eretz Yisrael. It's like nowadays, literally nowadays, 2026, Tavshin Pei Vav, right? We are aware of Schar V'Onesh. We know that we have to keep the Torah, otherwise we can be punished. We say Shema every day, V'ayam Shema Tishmo Messiah Hashem Nochim Spas Chayom, etc., etc. And if you don't listen, right, God will stop the rain. That's bad. And yet, you ask yourself, we ask ourselves, right? How many of us are really concerned that we're going to be kicked out of the land, that we're going to be uprooted and made to leave? How many of us are really concerned, as the Pasuk says in Haftara, V'hishpati mamluchut Beit Yisrael? He's going to stop the rule of Beit Yisrael, right? We're ready to hear. We're not really ready to hear things like that. It's like in Yirmiyahu, when he gives them bad nevuos, and the people respond by saying, Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem. God's not going to destroy his house. How do we know? How do we know? It could be that he will. It's so sad. Let's imagine, for example, a situation where tomorrow a religious Zionist, a very well-respected religious Zionist rabbi gets up in Israel and he says, we're going to get kicked out of the land. What would our response be? So my response would be, he's not really a Zionist, because Zionists know we're not going to get kicked out of the land. But why do we know that? Why is that the case? And that brings us, or at least it brings me, to Yom Yerushalayim, which I think is critical for this, because Yom Yerushalayim is like it's a fault line between the pre and the post. Meaning, I don't remember the land of Israel before Yerushalayim. I don't remember the 6-day war at all. I'm too young for that. But when you go back and read things, we read like the Rav's speeches that he gave on Yom Ha'atzmaut before 1967, there's a sense you get of fear. I remember the story Mrs. Lichtenstein once told me that in 1948, the state was declared on a Friday. Her parents, the Rav and his wife, left the radio on the porch of their home in Brookline. And she said it wasn't because they were so excited that there was going to be a state. It was they were terrified there was going to be a massacre and something terrible was going to happen. And I think, yes, the state was founded in 1948, but we didn't get the confidence, we didn't have the belief that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was really doing this until 1967. For 19 years, we had a state, it's true, but if a prophet had gotten up and said, well, keep the Torah and you'll keep your state, don't keep the Torah and you'll lose it, we would have believed him literally. But I don't know if that's the case now. People don't consider the possibility, the horrible possibility, that we're not guaranteed anything. We're promised, and if we keep our part of the promise, and we keep the Torah, and we keep halacha, and we're good, and we make a world in which we care about people who are poor and widows and orphans and all the things that the Nevi'im talk about, that's great. But if not, we're at risk. Now, the problem with giving a nevuah like this is that it's depressing and it's terrifying, and people might reject it completely. So Hoshea needs to soften the message. He has to give some divrei nechama. And he does that at the beginning of our Haftara, right? After the first parak of Hoshea, which is so terrible, he gives us some divrei nechama, and he balances, right, the horrible parts of our Haftara with the more uplifting parts of our Haftara. And maybe the answer to our question we asked at the beginning of the shir was, is it a nevuah of nechama? Is it a nevuah of puranut? It's both. Parts are puranut and parts are nechama. Right? If you look, it's interesting. If you look after the Chet HaMeraglim in Shlach, so the psukim say, "Vaydaber Hashem Moshe lemor daber b'nei Yisrael v'ma'atalhem ki tavo al eretz moshotechem asher ani noten lachem va'azitem ishel Hashem Allah uzarach l'falei neder." Right? All mitzvahs, the Ishim would only be brought in Eretz Yisrael, and the Ramban right there says, "Ki tavo al eretz moshotechem asher hivtiach et achar shehivtiach et habanim." That's after God told us, yes, after 40 years in the Midbar, you will come to Eretz Yisrael. Hishlim lahem torat hakarbonot sheyakrivu nisachim b'vuam la'aretz. He gave us a mitzvah that's going to apply when we come to Eretz Yisrael. Why? Says Ramban. V'ulai hayazeh azeh. Maybe the reason is l'nachamam u'l'havticham. If God gives us a mitzvah that's only going to be knowing in Eretz Yisrael, we can be confident that we're going to go into Eretz Yisrael. The depressed people who said, maybe our children will sin again. So you need a balance. And that's what Hoshea is doing. Hoshea is balancing the terrible parts with the more uplifting parts. Right? Says the pasuk in our Haftara, Ki zaneta imam hovisha horatam Ki amra elcha acharei ma'havai notnei lachmi u'meimai tzarmi u'fishti shamli b'shikuyai. Right? Their mother is a whore. Right? She conceived them shamelessly, and then she said, I'll go after my earlier lovers who give me bread and water and all the things that I need, my wool and my linen, my oil, my drink. V'ridfat ma'havei v'lo tasigotam u'bikashatam v'lo timtza. Right? And then when that doesn't work out, she's going to go back. Vihi lo yadan, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, she doesn't know. What doesn't she know? Ki anochi natati lo hadagan v'hatirosh v'hayitzar. It's me, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I give her all the things she needed. V'kesev beiti lo v'zahav asu labal. I gave her what she needed, and she should be loyal to me. And goes on the Navi and says, "Vaya bayom ahu nenum Hashem tikri ishi, v'lo tikri liod ba'ali." Fascinating. Says the pasuk, right, that the day will come where we will call God Ishi, right, Ish, my husband or my wife, v'lo tikri liod ba'ali, but we're not going to call him Ba'ali. So Ba'ali could be my husband, or Ba'ali could be my master. Right, in the next pasuk, "V'hasiyosiat shemot habe'alim mipiha v'lo yizachru bishmam." I will wipe out the word Baal from their language, they won't say it, and the name of Baal will never be mentioned. So it's hard not to recognize, right? Baal is the name of the avodah zarah that was prevalent in the time of Hoshea. That's what he was complaining about. So the pasuk says, "Will be called Ishi," and not Baali, meaning we're going to wipe out the word Baal from the Jewish people, from their lexicon, from our mode of behavior, right? So this balance between terrible things and good things is more or less the theme of Haftara. And then we come to the end. And anybody who puts on tefillin every day knows the psukim by heart. Ve'irastich li la'olam, ve'irastich li b'tzedek u'v'mishpat b'chesed v'rachamim, ve'irastich li be'emunah, V'yadat et Hashem. Right? It's an amazing metaphor. Ve'irastich means, right, in English, in fancy English, it says, I'll be betrothed. But really, it's Erusin versus Nisuin. Rav Meidan made this point. Right? In many ways, being engaged, Erusin, is better than being married. not in all ways, obviously, meaning the love you have for your fiancé, the love you have for the person you're going to marry, when you're all excited to begin to think about the future, when you're all excited, especially because your love hasn't been consummated yet, right? It's a pure, beautiful period of time in a relationship, right? Everything's ahead of me. Everything's magical. Everything is a dream. But, and Rav Eli did not make this point, but I think it's obvious, the metaphor is clear. It's not permanent. There are many broken engagements. Getting engaged is not the commitment that getting married is. And maybe more than anything, that's the balance point that the Navi is trying to make. And maybe that's the point that we, Datilu, me people, need to remind ourselves of, certainly around Yom Yerushalayim, Tafshin Pei Vav. Nothing is permanent. God promised us the land, but only if we build the kind of society and we are the kind of people He wants us to be. If we commit to Him, then He'll commit to us. Then our erusin will turn into an isuin, our engagement will turn into a marriage, and then we'll be zocha to the pasuk of Od Yishama Ba'arei Yehuda v'chutzot Yerushalayim, Kol Sason v'Kol Simcha, Kol Chatan v'Kol Kala. Shabbat Shalom, Yom Yerushalayim Sameach, and see you next week.